Hey everybody, welcome back into the Frogs Up TCU Sports Podcast, recording here Wednesday evening, November 1st, going up Thursday, November 2nd. We have a Thursday night football game to talk about. TCU going on the road, taking on Texas Tech, two teams that have really been struggling recently, looking for a much needed win. Crazy things always seem to happen in Lubbock, and we will talk about this matchup and let you know everything you need to know as TCU gets ready for this pivotal matchup against Texas Tech. We have some Big 12 football to preview as well, along with some Big 12 news regarding future football schedules. We have men's basketball to talk about. We have soccer to talk about. It's going to be a big episode tonight. I'm Russ Hodges. That is Anthony North, and we are back here once again to talk about all of the latest and greatest in TCU sports. We're getting to a really exciting time in the year with November. We have basketball right around the corner. We have football still going on. I'm really excited for this month. Anthony, how excited are you to get into this busy month of November with football and basketball and everything else going on?
Man, yeah, I've been really looking forward to the men's basketball season and the women's basketball season. It's unfortunate the football season hasn't gone quite as we hoped, but there's still a lot of excitement here, a lot to play for the Horned Frogs. So, yeah, should be a fun November into the holiday season for sure.
And this episode, of course, is brought to y'all by our friends at Charlie Hustle Clothing Company. Charlie Hustle, vintage made fresh. Go to charliehustle.com. Get your TCU Horned Frog apparel as you hit the road for Lubbock. Use the promo code FROGSOWAR. Get 15% off all TCU items. Or you could use the promo code 101215 TEN1215 for 15% off any non-sale item at charliehustle.com. T-shirts, hoodies, they have it all. Check it out. charliehustle.com, vintage made fresh. TCU 4-4 on the season, 2-3 in the conference. Going into Lubbock tomorrow night, 6 o'clock, FS1. Really, this is a must-win game for TCU, in my opinion. If TCU has any chance of getting to a bowl game with Texas and Oklahoma still to come, you have to go on the road and win this one. And TCU, unfortunately, has really struggled on the road over the last few weeks. We talked about the blowout at Iowa State and the blowout against Kansas State on the Sunday episode that we recorded here recently. But the season really is on the line for this game. And you're going up against a Texas Tech team that's 3-5, that's had some injuries at the quarterback position. The defenses play fairly well for Texas Tech, but if you lose this game, I think it's going to be very difficult to get to a bowl. So, Anthony, what are your first impressions of this Texas Tech team, and how big are the stakes for TCU in this one?
Yeah, I think this goes to the big point in this game is going to be motivation, and TCU should have all the motivation in the world to go in and take this game and at least put on an impressive effort out there in Lubbock, because yeah, I mean the stakes are for this season, it comes down almost to this as a must-win game. I think TCU still could take the game from Baylor and maybe steal one from one of those two top conference contenders, but you drop this one and you're really putting your back against the wall. So will TCU come out and show that gumption and show that it's not, they haven't quit on this season? I think we'll find out pretty early in this one. It's a tricky spot. It's definitely, the weeknight game in Lubbock. It's going to be a weird atmosphere. It's always a tricky place anyway. But yeah, I think this Texas Tech team is also with its back against the wall. So they're going to be coming out in a very similar state. And as I've been thinking about this game and going back and forth with some of the Texas Tech people that write about the Red Raiders, I think the Horned Frogs and Red Raiders are very similar. The way the season has gone, big time expectations, big time failures early in the season, injuries, and just like a general malaise about things. And it's been lack of execution on offense. It's been giving up the bad play when you can't have it on defense. And so I think it will make for a very intriguing game on Thursday night. It should be a fun one. But these two teams are very evenly matched and are coming out in a very similar, you got to go and take this game if you want to get anything out of this season.
And both of these teams have had injuries at the quarterback position. Obviously, no Chandler Morris for TCU going into this game. Josh Hoover will once again get the start. It'll be his third career start, second one on the road. Meanwhile, the Red Raiders have had three different quarterbacks take snaps this year. Tyler Shaw came in as the starter, suffered an injury early in the season that knocked him out for good. Baron Morton took over as the backup. He also suffered an injury. I believe he's going to play tomorrow. Do you know any information about that, Anthony? Do you know if he's playing?
Yeah. Coach McGuire in his media availability has said that Morton is ready to go. I don't know if he said that he's 100%, but I think the message was if they had a game last week in the bye week that he would have played that game. So yeah, I think we can expect Morton to be out there taking the snaps for the Red Raiders.
Yeah, I think Baron Morton at 70 or 80% is probably better than Jake Strong, who's the third stringer and had back-to-back 3 INT games for Texas Tech. And regardless of who's been the quarterback over these last few weeks, this offense has really revolved around Taj Brooks. I think he's the best player on that Texas Tech offense. He's had a enormous workload over the last several weeks. He's getting 30 plus carries, 30 to 35 touches a game. Everything that they do on offense right now really revolves through him. And then on the defensive side, they played some pretty good ball this year. Outside of the Oregon game, that's a very talented offense, obviously, that Oregon has with Bo Nix and that crew. But the defense, I think, you look at some of the numbers this year, they've been a little bit better than we've seen from Texas Tech in years past. So, Anthony, looking at this team offensively, defensively, what sticks out to you about what Texas Tech has done this year and what TCU should expect from the Red Raiders tomorrow?
Yeah, if it weren't for Ollie Gordon going Barry Sanders mode for Oklahoma State, Taj Brooks would be considered the top back in the Big 12 and one of the top backs in the country. He's having a terrific campaign. And, part of that is he is getting kind of a ridiculous workload as the bell cow back for this Texas Tech offense. He, is getting 20 to 30 carries a game, 30 to 35 touches a game. He's coming out but he is delivering with those. Some of these games, again, in these losses, he is averaging like 3 to 4 yards per carry. But still, his accumulation of yards has been very impressive, and he has broken off enough runs to say he is the focal point of that offense and has to be the number one thing that the TCU defense will have to focus on stopping. I think that coming off of that Kansas State game where the Wildcats ran at will from the very first snap against TCU, it will be interesting to see how they go and attack Taj Brooks and really how the Red Raiders plan to run this offense. I think about, you cannot just let Baron Morton sit back there and take easy shots to get into a rhythm. You don't want to give him the way that BYU treated Josh Hoover in Josh Hoover's first start. You can't just, force him to beat you, as it were, because, as limited experience and maybe his ceiling's not that high, he is absolutely capable of hitting those, getting into a rhythm and hitting those quick ones. So yeah, I think TCU will definitely have to focus on Taj Brooks. He's been very impressive this season, and I think he's been kind of toiling away there in Lubbock, where they have run running back by committees for a lot of years, where he's Sir Roderick Thompson and I don't know. They've had a whole list of guys where he's one of the guys, but now he is the guy, and he's absolutely taken the reins there. So I think that's the focus on the offensive side. Defensively, yeah, they're pretty almost impressive. I think that some of the pressure stats and the pass rush stats are going to fall off when you lose a pass rush edge talent like Tyree Wilson to the NFL.
Mhm.
Top of the first round draft pick guy. But overall, their statistic profile is pretty solid. Slightly worse against the pass than they are against the run, but they're kind of middle of the pack in the conference, middle of the pack nationally in both rush and pass defense. So I think I'm not sure the best way to attack it. Probably it's going to be on Josh Hoover to at least manage this game and keep things under control so that in no way does this game become him giving the game away to Texas Tech. But there's no all right, this is the one way that you attack Texas Tech. That's not really there against this defense. So I think it'll be an interesting chess match to see what Kendall Briles can figure out and if he can keep it simple for Hoover and allow him to work at ease within the offense.
Yeah, and as we get into our keys to victory, for me, it's very simple. I think this game is going to come down to whichever team runs the ball better is probably going to win. Taj Brooks and Imani Bailey are both backs that have shown they are capable of handling large workloads. They've shown big play, big game potential. Imani Bailey hasn't really been the featured guy the last couple of games. He's had some quality outings. He had a 100-yard rushing game against K-State, but it only came on 12 carries. Meanwhile, Taj Brooks is averaging, roughly 30 or so touches over the last few weeks. So I talked about it on Sunday as a key to victory, and seeing some of the press conference remarks from Sonny Dykes earlier this week, TCU coming off the bye week, obviously, and he talked about reestablishing the offensive line and reestablishing their run blocking up front. And that was frankly music to my ears because TCU has been very inconsistent in that area this season, particularly over the last couple of weeks where, against West Virginia, against Kansas State, you really struggled at times to block up front. You were really losing the war in the trenches. So offensively for TCU, I think, as I said on Sunday, you have to feed Imani Bailey. I'll say it. He's your best player on offense, and I think he needs to have a big game in order for TCU to pull out this win. And then for the TCU defense, some optimism that Johnny Hodges might be back for this game. There were some comments from Dykes earlier this week that said there's a chance that he could play. He's been out for several weeks now with that hand injury. That would be a huge boost for the TCU defense, getting a all Big 12 caliber linebacker back in the middle of that defense against a Texas Tech offense that features one of the best backs in the conference. So I think if TCU is able to come out and really practice what they preach as far as reestablishing that run blocking, and if Imani Bailey can have a big game like we've seen him have earlier this year, I think the Frogs are going to be in a really good position to win this game. But if they lose that fight in the trenches the way we saw them lose it against West Virginia, against even Iowa State and against Kansas State, it's going to be tough. Playing on the road, you don't want to put all the pressure on your young quarterback to have to make plays. I think the best way to get around that is to run the football effectively. So I really hope that TCU can get it going on the ground, particularly in the red zone. And we've talked on almost every episode over the last several weeks about the issues that TCU has had in the red zone. Just run the ball effectively in the red zone. I mean, Imani Bailey has 2 touchdowns in 8 games. And as well as he's played this year, averaging over 100 yards a game, it's almost inexcusable that he only has 2 rushing touchdowns. So feed Imani Bailey, please. Feature him and reestablish that run game and take the pressure off your young quarterback. That's how I think TCU goes out there and wins this game.
Yeah, the key to me, and I said it at the jump, is what is the willingness to go and go make it happen in this game. Sonny Dykes said it after the Colorado game that TCU is not the most excited team to play football. Clearly, as Cooper Beebe pointed out during the Kansas State game, TCU was out there having given up after being blown out. Will the coming off of this bye week, there was clearly that was one of the focuses of the time off, was to regroup, build some pride as a team, to work together for each other. It's something that has been missing from this team, that was very, very evident on the 2022 squad that made it so successful. So has that produced some fruit to get TCU out there motivated and ready to put on a show in Lubbock? I guess X's and O's type stuff. I think that defensively, TCU needs to find a way to get any pressure on Baron Morton, make his day a little bit more difficult, because in these games that the Frogs have lost, they've been really poor at getting any pressure on the quarterback. TCU statistically still is among the best in the conference at sacks, with quantity of sacks. But, you watch the game and it feels like these quarterbacks have all the time in the world, and they're allowed to kind of pick their poison out there. And, we talked a lot about Taj Brooks on this offense, but Texas Tech still does have some receivers who are talented and, big, strong, athletic guys that can go and make plays. So, I think that if Bradley or Price or somebody like that has a big day picking on Abe Kamara or Avery Helm or somebody like that, or if even if Josh Newton gets burnt once or twice in this one, I think that secondary is going to be tested, maybe more than we're projecting here, just because we're talking about Taj Brooks, but I do think that we're going to need to see the secondary make some plays. And maybe that's Bud Clark ball hawking out there, making an interception. But whatever this defense can do to make life just a little bit more difficult for Morton, returning from that injury, he might be a little bit tentative. Or if he's not a fully 100%, maybe you're able to get some pressure on him or force him into some bad decisions. I think that's big. And yeah, offensively, I think it's just don't make the big mistake. I think Hoover will need to get stuff done. And yeah, I think Bailey will get his. Amani Bailey is going to. The question will be, does the TCU play callers actually give him the ball when it matters? Does, when the game's in the balance, when you need that 1 or 2 yards to get, when you need to get into the end zone, is it going to be Amani Bailey, or is it going to be a sweep reverse to Jalen Robinson, or a backwards pitch to Jack Besh? I think if TCU can keep it simple, keep it straightforward, Amani Bailey and even Josh Hoover and the receivers should be able to do enough to score points in this game. So, I think those are my keys to the game there for sure, is keep it simple on the offense and hassle the quarterback on defense.
And getting into our predictions now, we'll have our Frogs of War roundtable posting Thursday morning on our website, frogsofwar.com. My prediction, TCU going on the road and getting a 34-17 win. I think TCU is going to come out and play some more inspired football. And I have a hard time thinking that this team is going to come out after a bye, after getting embarrassed at Kansas State. I just can't see TCU coming out and laying another egg. I think TCU is going to come out and play some good football and come away with a much needed win, 34-17.
I like it. I think that might be a little bit optimistic. I'm still very worried about this game. I do have TCU taking the win on the road out there. It would make 5 straight wins over Texas Tech overall and 5 straight wins over Texas Tech in Lubbock, which is a pretty impressive run, because the these teams have been up and down a little bit, but to still have that kind of a streak against a conference foe, that's never really bottomed out. That's would be an impressive streak to continue. I have TCU winning 31-24. I think that this game, uh, like I said, I think it's going to be pretty exciting. It may be a little bit sloppy. I think these weeknight games can be sloppy, even coming off of a bye. It gets you off your schedule a little bit. You're not on your typical routine of things. So I think it'll be a little bit weird and a little bit sloppy, but that both of these teams will find ways to score points. And TCU just has a few more stops in it, and maybe a wins the turnover battle in this one, wins the time of possession battle, wins the field position battle. Some of the things that the things around the margins that TCU has failed to be fully successful, they find a way to get those aspects cleaned up. Win the penalty battle. I think that's another thing too, is just the discipline here. I think coming off of the bye, there's going to be a renewed focus. That's at least, as with purple glasses, that's my hope and expectation, is that TCU found a way to clean those things up with this extra time and goes out there and gets a win by a touchdown.
And this will be the first of many games in the Big 12 this weekend. We have a full slate
Huge
of Big
week
12
in the
games
conference.
and some yeah, absolutely, some huge games, and there are going to be games going on in the Big 12 all day that you're going to want to be on the edge of your seat for. Kicking off with Kansas State at Texas, two ranked teams going at it with serious Big 12 title game implications. That'll be 11 a.m. on Fox. And then we have Bedlam, Oklahoma at Oklahoma State, possibly for the last time ever as the Sooners get ready to leave for the SEC. That'll be a 2:30 kickoff on ABC. Couple of snoozers, Houston at Baylor, 2:30 on ESPN Plus. UCF going to Cincinnati. A battle of newbies there in the conference, 2:30 on FS1. Followed by another Big 12 FS1 game, BYU at West Virginia. Mountaineers still hanging around, 3-2 in the conference, only one game back of the five teams that are tied at 4-1 in the Big 12. And then capping off the night with Kansas at Iowa State. Kansas looking to build off of that huge upset over Oklahoma last weekend. They will hit the road and try to knock off the Cyclones, who are also in the hunt for a Big 12 championship game spot. That'll be a 6 o'clock kickoff on ESPN. I'm 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 trying to figure out which game I'm most excited about. I want to say Kansas State at Texas because that almost feels like a Big 12 title game preview, but I think there are going to be some shenanigans in this Bedlam game. Oklahoma State, the comments that Mike Gundy made over the offseason about how Oklahoma doesn't want to continue this rivalry, and the run that the Cowboys are on right now, and Ollie Gordon playing out of his mind, and Alan Bowman playing some good ball, Oklahoma coming off a loss. I think this is going to be a zany game. I think it's going to be really exciting. I think there's going to be some trash talk. So I'm going to be front and center for that one. And then Kansas and Iowa State, I picked the Cyclones to win that one. I think that's a little bit of an upset pick, but there's just something. I think there's going to be some magic in Ames Saturday night, and I think the Cyclones are going to come out and get an upset over a Kansas team that just took down Oklahoma. So, Anthony, what are your thoughts on this slate of games, and what are the matchups that you're most curious to see?
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. I think that the Bedlam is the most juicy just because it's in Stillwater, and it's going to be, that atmosphere is going to be pretty nasty. I think that the Oklahoma State fans, this one it's called Bedlam. I think it's always a nasty atmosphere, but it's just turned up all the way to 11 on this one. I mean, I think that that crowd is going to be ready to explode at everything that happens. So I think that one is going to be extremely exciting. You know, Actually, both of these top games, it's possible that the longtime favorites, the future former conference mates, end up rolling in those games and kind of run away with it. And it was all a little bit of a, uh, anticlimactic. But I think that if Alan Bowman has kind of gotten himself on track and Ollie Gordon can take advantage of some injuries along that Oklahoma defense, it could get very, very interesting there. And then, yeah, I mean, the Kansas State Texas game should be fun as well. Um, it feels a little bit like TCU's game at Texas last year, where um, Texas is a big favorite, but just because it's Texas, and uh, but all logic kind of points to it being a very close game, or that Kansas State might actually be the better team here, particularly with Quinn Ewers out. We saw Malik Murphy had an okay game and did enough to get a win last week, but it's not the same going up against Kansas State in a game with the pressure like this. I think that it could, that one, the Wildcats could definitely go take that game and go put themselves in the front driver's seat for a return trip to Arlington and perhaps a return conference championship. So very exciting games there at the top. The Kansas Iowa State game, I guess, as a those two teams are kind of hovering under the radar, ready to jump up if one of the top contenders loses a game. This probably acts as a conference title elimination game, but should be a fun one. And I'll just touch on UCF Cincinnati. It's not of very much importance, but finally one of these teams will get a conference win. This struggling, these two teams who of the four coming in had the most recent success at the largest level, making New Year's Six games, Cincinnati making the playoff. So came in with the most success, probably came in with the most expectations, the most swagger, and they've been humbled a bit upon a rival at the Power 5 level. So will be interesting to see which of them goes and gets a win. I think if this were in Orlando, I think it'd be a runaway for the Knights, but in Cincinnati, Nippert Stadium is a pretty fun place. So I know those fan bases have a lot of history together and kind of a lot of fun jabs back and forth. So even if the game's not fun, it'll be a fun one to kind of follow on social media as those two fan bases chirp at each other.
And sticking with the Big 12 conference theme, there was a big news release earlier today with the Big 12 releasing the future football schedules for 2024 through 2027. And this will be the 16-team conference with the departure of Texas and Oklahoma and the addition of Arizona, Arizona State, Utah, and Colorado. The Big 12 is going to be sticking with the 9-game format. I know there was some question about whether or not they would stick with 9 or go to 10. It's going to be a 9-game schedule in conference between 2024 and 2027. TCU will have 5 home games in 2024. The rivalry with Baylor is going to stay intact throughout that 4-year span. So the Frogs will be taking on the Bears over each of those 4 seasons. No trip to Colorado or Oklahoma State until 2027. And looking at the 2024 schedule, TCU will have the non-conference at Stanford as well as another non-conference at SMU. That leaves 1 slot remaining on the schedule. My guess is it's probably going to be an FCS team. But overall, looking at these schedules and some of the rivalries that have been kept intact, some of the rivalries that may be going away, Anthony, what are your thoughts on this release and just what it means not only for TCU's future, but for the future of this conference?
Yeah, I think generally there was a little bit of negativity about this just because of the limited number of fully protected 4-year annual rivalries here. In addition to TCU Baylor, you've got Arizona State, Arizona, BYU, Utah, and Kansas State, Kansas as the only protected rivalries, which means all of the rest of the conference does not have a team that it will play all 4 of these years. So, you don't get Texas Tech and TCU all 4 years. You don't get Iowa State and Kansas State all 4 years. So I think there was a lot of pushback about that, particularly um, the Farmageddon game, I guess, matters to a lot of people, apparently. But you know, I think that this was about as good as they could have done this without going to a 10-game league schedule. I think um, it could have been more interesting to have a 10-game schedule, and there would have been some fun ways to play that. But I think this still makes a lot of sense, and it will make for some really unbalanced years. I mean, you don't know who's going to be good forever, but TCU has 3 of the 4 years will play against Utah, which will be a fun rivalry renewed. But 2 of those 3 are in Salt Lake City. So TCU, maybe you might say, got a little bit of the short end of the stick there, having to go to what will likely be one of the top contenders for the Big 12 going forward. Um, having to go to Salt Lake City twice is tough. And yeah, it's unfortunate that Frog fans don't get to go to Boulder again until 2027. Don't get to go to Stillwater again until 2027. That's a long time to be conference mates with a team and not see the opposing stadium. But on the whole, I mean, I think this is pretty terrific. I think it's fun to look ahead and see games on next season's schedule where TCU will be hosting Arizona, hosting UCF. I think that that's exciting to see those guys on the schedule. And the more I look at it, the more I'm already talking myself into, well, TCU could probably be a contender for the 12-team playoff next year, looking at this schedule. I mean, Stanford, SMU, Baylor, Cincinnati, you've got at Utah and at Kansas. That's, Oklahoma State at home, at least, Texas Tech at home, UCF at home. You've, other than Utah and Kansas, you've probably got your toughest games at home. So already looking ahead to 2024 football, and who knows who the players or, the coaching staff will be for TCU next year. But it's just always exciting to look ahead to the future and think about what may come.
And y'all can continue to follow us online at frogsaward.com as we recap the Big 12 football results on a weekly basis and also cover what's going on in the conference, as we will go ahead and shift gears here from football into basketball. Yes, TCU men's basketball is officially here. It's going to be an exciting month of November. As I said at the top of the episode, we're going to have a full month of football still to play, along with a whole lot of basketball. Both the men's and women's teams will be officially tipping off the season next week. But TCU men's basketball held an exhibition game earlier this week against Texas Wesleyan, winning the game 98-61. Everybody in a TCU uniform got a chance to play, and we were really excited to see what this lineup would look like. Emmanuel Miller, of course, all Big 12 preseason honoree. He led the way with 24 points, 11 of 12 shooting from the field. Jameer Nelson, big-time transfer coming over from Delaware. He made an impact all the way around with 12 points, 5 assists, and 4 rebounds. Micah Peavy, Jamie Dixon talked about him a little while ago, saying that expectations are going to be higher for him, and they're very optimistic about what he can bring to the team this year. He had 13 points and 4 rebounds in this game, 60 points in the paint for TCU, 36 points off of turnovers, and 39 fast break points. So again, this is Texas Wesleyan. It's an exhibition game. Of course, TCU is going to put up a big number and win a lopsided game. But one little negative from this was TCU shot 18 of 33 from the free throw line. That's 15 missed free throws in a home exhibition game. That's not ideal. But all in all, I think this was a exciting start to the season, everybody got in on the action. Everybody had a chance to play significant minutes. We got our first look at what TCU's starting five could be. We had Jameer Nelson, along with Trey Tennyson, the transfer from Corpus Christi, Emmanuel Miller, Jacoby Coles, and Ernest Uday, the big time center transfer from Kansas. So, Anthony, I'm not sure how much of this you followed or caught, but any thoughts on the results or what we could be expecting from this men's team as we get into the official season next week?
Yeah, the first thing on my thoughts here is heavy grain of salt on this. I mean, yes, it is an exhibition against Texas Wesleyan. TCU last season had an exhibition ahead of its season opener, and similarly blew out the team. Looked terrific. Eddie Lampkin was out there with big dunks, pumping the crowd up, and the team looked incredible. And then in the first game of the regular season, very nearly lost to Arkansas Pine Bluff.
Mhm.
Needed a stop on the final play at the final seconds in order to escape that one, trailing by like 20 points in the first half. So uh, it's great to see all of this stuff, but one, it doesn't count. Two, they've got to go and actually perform when the real games begin, and regardless of what you may think of the quality of the upcoming opponents that are probably going to be in the Ken Palm 200 or worse, eh, you still got to go and actually play like this when the real lights turn on. So um with that caveat, a couple of things that were really great to see. Um, 3-point shooting was pretty solid. I mean, 37%, 38%, but the things to note here, Micah Peavy, if Micah Peavy's going to shoot 75% from the 3-point line and 5 of 9 from the field, that's that's 6 man of the year territory there. I mean, that is not something that TCU's been able to rely on from him, is an offensive output like that. He's been known as the defensive stopper. So for him to put on a show like that is good to see. We'll see again if he'll be able to do that in real gameplay. Um, what else? Yeah, Trey Tennyson also was 2 of 4 from 3-pointers. I think that's impressive to see. I think that's going to be his game. That'll keep him in a starting lineup. As if he is um, a real dead eye from long distance, that's going to be big time. Uh, Emmanuel Miller hype train is, we're here at Frogs of War. We're probably going to get that hype train rolling
Yeah.
big time, because if his performance, he made his 3-pointer, 11 of 12 from the field, 5 assists, 2 rebounds, 2 steals, and a block in just over 20 minutes of play. I mean, that's what you like to see for your superstar returner. And I think the way that this team is set up, and you've been talking about it, Russ, for a while, headed into this season, of Emmanuel Miller's ready for a breakout, that it hurts to lose guys like Mike Miles and Damian Ball, but it sets up for the way that he will serve this team with Jameer Nelson and a big man like Ernest Uday Jr. down low. It will open things up for Emmanuel Miller in a way that he is set for a big time breakout going forward. So I think it was nice to get this little taste of the basketball season, and really pumped for next week as the real thing tips off.
Yeah, I thought about it a little bit, and there's a little bit of a parallel between TCU men's basketball and TCU football, in that the men's team may not have the star power that it had last year with Mike Miles Jr. and Damian Baugh, but the depth is very noticeable. And I think when you look at this game, Avery Anderson coming off the bench, Micah Peavy coming off the bench, I think those guys were a little banged up, and maybe Jamie Dixon was just trying to protect them a little bit, manage their minutes. But Trey Tennyson coming over, this is a pure shooter. And Jamie Dixon made the comments that Trey Tennyson may be TCU's best pure shooter since Desmond Bain. And if he's going to be shooting about 40% or greater than 40% from three, like he has throughout his career, he's going to be very difficult to to leave off the floor. But looking at some of these players, Jacoby Coles, we know that he can score. Trey Tennyson can obviously shoot the ball and score. But you have some options as far as if you want to go offense for defense. I mean, if you want to sub out Coles for PV, rotate them at the three. Avery Anderson and Tennyson can rotate out of the backcourt, offense for defense. Jameer Nelson, to me, is going to be stepping into that role that Mike Miles had as your lead scoring guard. And then in the front court, Nelson had rave reviews about Ernest Uday after the game. They had multiple alley-oop connections in this game. And Xavier Cork right now still looks like he's the backup big coming off the bench. He and Isam Mustafa, the transfer from Coastal Carolina, are probably going to be battling for that role throughout the season. But I think when you consider all of these players and Chuck O'Bannon and the freshmen coming in, Isaiah Manning and Jace Posey, TCU really is going to have a strong 9 to 10 man rotation where you're going to have guys getting regular minutes and having very distinct roles on this team. So I'm really excited for basketball, and we will officially tip off the season next Monday. Both the men and women will be at home next Monday. The men will be playing against Southern at 8 p.m. I believe the women tip off at 4 o'clock. I can't remember who they're playing, but we'll have a doubleheader at Schollmeyer Arena next Monday. So if you're in Fort Worth, near campus, head out to Schollmeyer next Monday and support TCU basketball as both the men and women get ready to tip off as we transition here into one of our final items of the podcast this evening. TCU Soccer, a one-and-done performance in the Big 12 tournament. TCU coming in as the number 3 seed, taking on UCF, the number 6 seed, and a troubling theme of conceding goals in the second half, rearing its ugly head again in this game. TCU took a 1-0 lead early in the first half. Gracie Bryan scored the first goal of the match very early on. TCU had a 1-0 lead going into the second half, where the Knights scored 3 goals. All 3 of them, or 2 of the 3 at least, I think, came over the last 20 to 25 minutes of the match. And TCU at one point was able to find an equalizer with Maddie Moody scoring about halfway through the second half. First career goal for her, but a goal given up in the 82nd minute resulted in a 3-2 loss for the Frogs. So TCU closing out the regular season / Big 12 tournament with a 6-2-2 conference record, 10-6-3 overall, and looking at possibly not making the NCAA tournament. The RPI for TCU, I believe I read it, fell by about 10 points after this loss to UCF. TCU was top 40 in RPI and is now barely top 50 after this loss. So Anthony, as our resident TCU soccer stan, what's your reaction to this loss, and how does this impact TCU's NCAA tournament hopes?
Yeah, the first thought is the Big 12 conference is pretty deep, and it goes probably 6 teams deep of very, very high level teams. And it's why it was so critical for TCU to have tried to have earned one of those top 2 seeds in the Big 12 tournament, to fall to the 3 seed and have to get this game against UCF, a very, very talented team that's played a difficult a difficult schedule and has been a national contender in the NCAA tournament many times. So you're putting yourself in a much more difficult position than you needed to be. I mean, BYU got their first game against the 10 seed Oklahoma as the 2 seed. So it was a big difference in competition that TCU had to face because it fell to that 3 seed. And so it sets you up for this type of a disappointment. And as far as, their bracketology projections and all of that, I think it would be hard to imagine TCU soccer being left out of the NCAA tournament. They played a very difficult non-conference schedule. Games against number one seed or number one overall team like Penn State, games again, they challenge themselves throughout the season. And while maybe the wins total doesn't look super great, the actual level of play that they've faced is much better than, RPI is always a flawed metric. And it rewards simply winning versus, who you're playing. So I I think they make it into the tournament. I think it's pretty clear they won't be a host site, unless it's just we want to have it in a place that's maybe a little bit warmer than another place. But um, I think that TCU Soccer will have, if it does get in the tournament, we'll have some things to clean up, particularly kind of the defensive lapses that it finds itself in these second halves. It's been a recurring issue throughout the season, but for TCU to finish third in the Big 12, a stacked Big 12 with, Texas Tech is something like number 4 overall. BYU is another highly ranked team, and Texas and UCF are very, very strong teams as well. So for TCU to be third in that conference, it wouldn't make much sense to be left out. But we know when you put it in the hands of the committees, who knows how it'll shake out.
And I believe the selection show is going to be next Monday, so we will find out for sure at that time whether or not TCU will be in the tournament. And y'all can continue to follow us not only here on Frogs Up, but also online and on Facebook and Twitter at Frogs of War as we continue to recap TCU Soccer and all of the other TCU athletic programs. I think that will wrap up our podcast this evening. Again, this was our midweek episode. We appreciate all of you listening in, and we appreciate all of the support. We will be back Sunday evening to record, and we will be, of course, recapping the Texas Tech football game. We'll have TCU volleyball to recap, and also TCU men's tennis right now is wrapping up the fall season at the ITA Fall National Championships. There are 5 TCU players competing out in San Diego right now, doing big things. So we will hit on that as well during our weekend episode this coming Sunday. So again, follow us online at frogsofwar.com, Facebook and Twitter at Frogs of War, and continue to hear us here on the Frogs Up TCU Sports podcast. I am Russ Hodges. That is Anthony North. And we will sign off this evening with a Frogs Up.
Frogs Up.